Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Future Directions of Veterans for Peace. It's a pleasure to have you here today and to listen to the different people on our panel and then ask you for your ideas on moving the organization forward. Thank you all for joining us today. I'll begin by introducing folks on the panel. First, my name is Susan Schnall. I'm president of the board of Veterans for Peace and have been active for about 50, 60 years, starting with anti-war work, with protesting the American war in Southeast Asia, and then moving into working in public hospitals, working with other organizations in healthcare, and then coming back to working where I feel my roots are, and that's with veterans and specifically with Veterans for Peace, and on a particular issue on Agent Orange, the terrible destruction that it caused both on the Vietnamese, on children, on future generation, and the destruction and continuation in the land that continues to harm those who live near those environmental hotspots. Patrick McCann is on our panel. Patrick has also been president of the National Board of Veterans for Peace. He was a former president from 2013 to 2014. He was on the board, oh my goodness, Patrick, for 11 years. Bless you. And he held the positions of VIP treasurer and recording secretary. Patrick was in the United States Air Force in 1970, 4 days prior to his 18th birthday. He volunteered for Vietnam, planned to be a career soldier. Patrick attended an event in Chicago on the second anniversary of the murder of Black Panthers Fred Hampton and Mark Clark by the FBI in Chicago on December 1971. He walked out of the event no longer their soldier. Patrick then engaged an ongoing battle with his commanding officers and the war machine, leading to a month in the stockade and an undesirable discharge. He separated for the U.S. Air Force on May 4th, 1972, 2 years after the Kent State Massacre. Patrick retired from 23 years of teaching high school English in the Maryland suburbs. He's been fully retired for 5+ years. I don't know that you're ever fully retired, Patrick, with all the work you do on peace and social justice issues. He lives in Palm Beach County, Florida. He's an active supporter of the Impacted Families movement, those who lost a family member to police murder. Welcome, Patrick.
Don't forget to unmute.
Thank you. This has been a good convention. Great workshops and speeches, music, and lots of raising money. It's important for Veterans for Peace to flourish due to the turmoil on this planet. We know this, that's why we're here, and why we can't afford to abandon the path we've walked for 4 decades. I spent much time on this presentation. I envisioned discussing building a donor culture, supporting younger veterans, women veterans, and veterans of color, resisting white supremacy, especially by engaging in the war at home about police murders of Black youth, and reviving the slogan, peace at home, peace abroad. Something happened at this convention that concerns me, however, and I wish to begin what I call a courageous conversation. Dave Klein, presente, used to say, never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. My concern with this convention has been how some people are constantly referring negatively to our recent short-lived post-9/11 national leadership, most of whom were women and people of color veterans. I believe this characterization is unhealthy and one-sided. Our last in-person convention was Spokane in 2019. 3 post-9/11 vets, 1 Latina, 1 African American, and 1 white, made an aggressive critique of male chauvinist group culture in VFP. There was lengthy open struggle on convention video, much to the surprise of VFP members in the audience, who to their credit respectfully listened. This was soon followed by our first and only post-9/11 national president and executive director, and a board dominated by post-9/11 veterans. That leadership was not perfect, but we all make mistakes in life, and each of us must look at the vet in the mirror. Let our work speak for us. What speaks well for the current Veterans for Peace Board of Directors is that the majority of its members are younger veterans, women veterans, or veterans of color. That is to be celebrated. Also to be celebrated is the work being done in Tijuana with and for deported Latino veteran members, and the work around the climate crisis. Younger veterans need us, and we need them. Vietnam-era veterans had time and numbers to build organizational capacity. Post-9/11 veterans had little time to do that, nor have had the same access to resources. But they need to take the baton before we pass. The official average age of Vietnam-era veterans is 71, but it's higher than that. I'm 71 and seldom meet a Vietnam-era vet younger than myself. It's more like 75. The official age of Iraq War and Afghanistan War veterans is half that, at 37. There has been a partisan and internecine generational battle for leadership in Veterans for Peace these past 4 years. I had hoped we were making headway handing over the baton of leadership to the next generation of vets, but we've lost a lot of post-9/11 veteran members in the last few years, and a lot of goodwill too. I bought 5 lifetime memberships for leading younger veterans in the past few years, and none are in VFP now. One young African-American male asked me years ago as he came on the VFP board if he would be part of the next wave of sacrifice. I said, I don't know. He was. All honor and respect to those still here. These past 4 years in VFP were detrimental to both generations of vets, but we have a chance to correct our errors. Let's not talk disparagingly about each other. It sure won't help if and when we collaborate with about-face veterans against the war, although they are barely surviving. What's past is past, but let's commit to recruit, listen to, and encourage 911 veterans, women veterans, people of color veterans, and associate members who are still around. Let's rise to the challenge of building a truly multiracial, gender-inclusive, intergenerational organization. Done.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you again, panelists, for being here. I think we all agree that we need to have a diverse board of directors, and that sometimes it also needs to be folks who understand what Veterans for Peace is about and continue to work for the benefit of peace and justice in this country and in the world. Thank you for starting us off on that conversation. It's a pleasure to introduce our next panelist, Matt Southworth, who I know Patrick and Matt worked together a number of years ago. Matt and I had some wonderful conversations, Matt, years ago at a convention when we had a discussion about the difference between the silverback gorillas and the bonobos and how different species actually can work for peace and are peaceful. So again, Matt is post 9/11. He is a fundraising professional with 2 decades of experience in organizing peace and justice lobbying and fundraising. Over much of the past decade, he has worked mainly in leadership and major gifts at Trinity College, Wilmington College, the American Red Cross, Friends Committee on National Legislation, FCNL, in Washington, D.C. While at FCNL, Matt worked first as a grassroots organizer and peace lobbyist, leading FCNL's advocacy on Afghanistan and U.S. drones policy, before he then transitioned to working as a major gifts officer. I'd also like to mention Matt and I worked together on the Agent Orange legislation that Barbara Lee presented to the House of Representatives. Presently, Matt is the Regional Director of Major Gifts for New England and Mid-Atlantic at Harvard University Graduate School of Design. He enjoys helping direct philanthropy in ways that best reflect donor goals and values. Matt joined the U.S. Army after high school as an intelligence analyst. He is a veteran of the Iraq War. After being honorably discharged, he attended Wilmington College, Ohio, and graduated magna cum laude in 2009 with a bachelor's degree in political science and history. Previously, Matt has served on the board of directors for Noah Webster House and West Hartford Historical Society Board of Directors, of Veterans for Peace, Board of Directors of Quaker House, Fayetteville, North Carolina, and on the President's Advisory Council at Wilmington College. Matt is a member of Veterans for Peace. He's passionate about learning. He is a Quaker, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, an avid hiker, a decent gardener, and loves spending time with his family. It's a pleasure to introduce you next, Matt. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone for joining us here. Thank you, Patrick, for your words. Much appreciated. I'm going to take a little bit of a broader view on the future of VFP, and of course, we all have our own sense of what this could be. This is just mine, and I hope to throw out some thought-provoking things that we can take on during the question and answer, and also during the discussion. So, I think there is a triad of threats to humanity right now. I think we can all agree, although we may disagree a little bit on where the line goes, but climate change, war, and nuclear weapons, to me, are the triad threat. And it's really just a summary of inaction and incompetence.
We can't see you.
Yeah, I have Matt spotlighted, but it's showing Susan, and I'm not sure why. Matt, are you sure
He
that
probably has a camera window, a camera cover that hasn't opened?
Camera
Becky.
cover is open.
he
Oh, I
was up
see him.
before?
Yeah, I see him.
See, now I just spotlighted him, and Becky turned up. So
Yes.
I'm gonna just put this on. I'm gonna put this on gallery view because I'm not sure what's
He's
going on with
showing
Matt.
now. He's
Am I up
spotlighted
now?
now.
To be completely honest, you're not missing anything if you can't see me. The brilliance is all in my words, I promise. So I'll just repeat what I had said just a second ago.
Well,
So it's fresh.
we heard you. It was just
Okay.
that you weren't showing up on the screen. So I'm going to leave it on gallery view where people are seeing you.
Okay, great. Sounds good. So let me just proceed then. So I think we need to create a vision that meets the moment. And what does that vision look like? What do we need to work for? To me, the strongest movements in American history have been movements to abolish, whether that be slavery or discrimination. Movements to abolish have made tremendous progress throughout American history, but of course, not without sacrifice and sometimes blood. But I think abolishing war and the preparation of war, abolishing nuclear weapons, and abolishing the use of fossil fuels, those three things, those three components are absolutely essential to the future work of VFP. And why do I throw fossil fuels in there? It's simply because as long as the so-called strategic defense of the United States relies on the U.S. military, which is the largest consumer of fossil fuels in the world and the largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world, we will continue to have these, to have war and the preparation for war. So how do we do this? I'm a really firm believer that in our capitalist system, we have two main levers of power. One of them is consumption. The other is labor. You could argue, I think, that the vote is a very weak third lever in a very corrupted political system. We should all try try to increase our effectiveness through engaging in electoral politics, but realize that as long as the deck is stacked against us as individuals, it will be really difficult to usher in the world we seek. But what we can do is work to get money out of politics, put corporations back in their place. If you just participated in the last workshop with Mike Ferner and others presenting, you got plenty of food for thought on that front. I think the other thing is, and this is what VFP does so well, is we need to get organized, stay organized, and continue to be organized, and bring more people into this movement by talking about war and the end of war in a practical sense and common sense kind of way that can reach people at their kitchen tables. So organizing labor and supporting labor organizations are also a really key part of that. I'll end my remarks there. I look forward to the question and answer and the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Our next panelist is Josh Shurley. Josh Shurley and I worked together on the last board, and he left, and thank goodness felt it important to come back and join the board again. So again, I would say, Patrick, oh, hi, Matt, I see you now on the big screen. And Josh agreed to come back and work with us again. Josh is a post-Cold War Army veteran who served as an infantryman throughout the 1990s and left military service in 2001. After leaving the military, Josh earned degrees in anthropology and political science from Cal State University, and later earned a PhD from the University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. His doctoral field research examined the role of AFRICOM and the efforts of U.S. Special Operations activities on civilian populations in Central Africa during the lesser-known interventions associated with the so-called Global War on Terror, which was a major impetus for his joining Veterans for Peace in 2016. Josh is currently an adjunct political science professor at Fresno State College, a proud member of the SCFT Union number 1533, as well as a board member and organizer with a handful of peace and social justice organizations in the local and national level. He also hosts a progressive radio program in the Central Valley for the local KPFA affiliate. Today, he is serving his second term on the VFP National Board of Directors and is the lead organizer of VFP Chapter 180 in Fresno, California. Welcome, Josh. And he has a very talented daughter who sang last night at our music session.
Thank you, Susan. And yeah, thanks to all your kind words about Ruby. She really appreciates that. She had a great time, so thanks for having her. Yeah, when Susan asked me to be a part of this panel, I have to admit I was pretty hesitant. You know, I don't necessarily feel super qualified really to talk about this topic as much as I would others, but you know, Susan has a way of convincing me as she does. That's why I'm back on the board. Which I'm grateful for, right? Because out of our comfort zone is where we grow, right? But since I was kind of at a loss, I thought the thing that I would do, and it kind of speaks to some of the things, especially that Patrick mentioned, is I thought I would reach out to some people, and so I did that. I thought of a short list of some folks to speak to about some of these issues, about the future of VFP, both positively and negatively. I talked to some people that were that are a vibrant part of this organization. And I spoke to some of the people who left the organization, or at least I reached out to them. Some responded, some did not. But yeah, a lot of great things were already said. And I know we want to make this a listening panel where we're listening to all of you. So I won't recap too much of what was already said, although a lot of that thunder was already stolen. Yeah, the future of VFP, I guess to me, it kind of really comes down to significant challenges that we face in two important ways, right? One is focused externally, right? What we do, the choices that we make as an organization, And then the other one is focused internally, right? The choices that we make about how we deal with one another, and ourselves as well. I guess I'll start with the external challenges because I think that's a little bit easier to talk about. It's a tough and confusing time to do peace organizing for a variety of reasons. A lot of them have been talked about at length at this convention. Jeffrey Sachs, for example, did a great job talking about the fact that the propaganda capabilities of government and of concentrated capital are more sophisticated now than they've ever been. We've got humanitarians and peace activists cheering for weapons being sent to liberate Ukraine. And while I'm no fan of the Russian state by any means, and that's just bonkers to me. So it's a weird situation in which we find ourselves. Another big challenge I think that we face in organizing, it was one thing to organize during when Iraq and Afghanistan is at the forefront, when we have a sort of a Trump president, Trump in the White House kind of a thing. But right now it's a tough time. Just in my dealing with the public and talking to people, it's tough to get the public to understand this issue of war, of this forever war that we are still engaged in. But without large scale troop deployments, at least in large enough numbers that the public doesn't necessarily get that we are at war, and so that's a challenge that I've come across. So there are a lot of choices that we have to make, right, about how we're going to navigate these things, the groups that we will ally with, who will collaborate with, and so on and so forth. And so and that's just something I'd like to pose a question to our members, right? What do you think are some of the ways that we face external challenges, and what are some of the ways that we can deal with those? The powers that be are hard at work splitting up groups like ours, right? Muddling our message and our purpose, and sowing discord and all of this kind of stuff. I just I don't want to make their job easy. And that brings us to the internal stuff, right? And that's a little bit tougher. And that's really the stuff that kind of Patrick alluded to so well. Engaging young people and more diverse members, which, as Patrick mentioned, we sort of we were on that road, and some things happened along the way. So, for example, I came on the board in early 2020 at a time when the board was awash in grievance and grudges. It seemed to me these were people that I didn't really know very well, but there was clearly some issues going on there. And as Mike put it yesterday during the ED report, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, while we must not dwell on the failings of the past, we have a responsibility to learn from them. And so, yeah, we have major concerns over splits and rifts within VFP over ideological, generational lines, right? We know that we need to draw in that more diverse membership. And so thanks for starting that courageous conversation, Patrick. That's I think a great starting point, and something that does need to be talked about. Yeah, I mean, and I reached out, like I said, to some of those folks, and we talked about some things, but I think the bottom line really is what it comes down to is we need to improve the way that we relate to one another. Excuse me. The way that we relate to one another. Challenging ourselves to be the best versions of ourselves, right? And so, yes, I mean, have there been issues with, for example, do some of our older members need to adapt and change in some of the ways that they relate to younger folks and veterans of color and all that? Absolutely. Meeting younger and more diverse activists where they are and being allies in ways that matter to them, and that means listening. And and that is something that I think that is a courageous conversation that does need to happen, right? To be able to cross over lines in ways that I see happening in many ways in chapters. In my own chapter, we don't seem to have we're a small chapter, and granted, but we have folks of different ages, and that doesn't seem to be an issue. I see folks working in many of the projects and working groups and not having those issues, but that is something that needs to improve. But it also means that within VFP, some of the younger folks, the veterans who are more ambitious and well, they need to also meet the more seasoned among us where they are as well, and to understand and appreciate the deep and significant historical roots of VFP, right? Golden Rule, for example, many other things we could talk about, right? And respecting those roots, and that did not always happen previously, and that's something that frankly could be improved upon as well. And so we need to get away. It seemed like I almost felt like the innocent child of two divorcing parents that were sort of bad mouthing each other. As a brand new board member, someone who was fairly new to the organization, it was a tough time. But I'm on a positive note. I'm very encouraged with the direction that we're going in. Susan has done a wonderful job of taking some of those ideas that were already kind of in the works and then implementing some new things and getting us on much better footing in terms of how we deal with one another. And so that's something I'm encouraged to report on. But yeah, getting away from this sort of internal power struggle, right? We need to dislodge the old guard of VFP and take it in a new direction. And then other folks saying, no, we need to organize and take back VFP. And that's just, to me, the wrong mindset, right? If we are not on the same page, then we are doing the power structures work for them. And that just doesn't make any sense. So anyway, and that's just the other aspect of it, right? What are some ways that we can improve what we do internally? And that's just something that I also would like to pose to everyone and get us thinking about those ways that we can within ourselves and the way that we deal with one another. How can we support each other? And there are lots of things that we can point to, but I've probably rambled on long enough. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I do look forward to hearing from others and putting a positive cap on things as we emerge from what has been a pretty great convention. So I will say I'm more encouraged and fired up about VFP than I have been in some time. I'm much more optimistic and hopeful than I have been probably since joining the board, to be honest. And it's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate everyone being a part of this convention. And thank you for making it such a special event. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Our next speaker is Mike Ferner, Interim Director of Veterans for Peace. Graduating high school in 1969, I see with a head full of John Wayne movies. I'm sorry, I thought, Mike, it was a head full of hair that came into my mind with that image, but a head full of John Wayne movies. Mike enlisted as a Navy corpsman and tried to resemble pieces of GIs, to reassemble pieces of GIs who arrived at Great Lakes Naval Hospital on frequent medevac flights from Vietnam, leading him to become a war resister and conscientious objector after serving on the carrier USS Hancock. He has been a union organizer, member of Toledo City Council, and communications director for the program on corporations, law, and democracy. Mike accompanied Kathy Kelly to Iraq just prior to the United States invasion in 2003, returning in 2004 for 2 months, and wrote Inside the Red Zone, A Veteran for Peace Reports from Iraq. Through 2010, he was busy speaking against the war and getting arrested for civil disobedience. Previously, he was a member and president of Veteran for Peace's board, with one other stint as interim director. It's yours, Mike Ferner. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you. That little microphone thing kept jumping around. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, my fellow panelists and everybody who's here. I need to say something in response to Patrick's remarks, and I don't say this in order to get into a big debate, but I just think that we need to have a clear understanding of what happened, because the change in administration and board members did not happen because people were in a hostile atmosphere and an unwelcoming atmosphere. It happened because for 2 years, no money was raised, and VFP was broke. And the people who were doing work, like necessary work, like writing the code of conduct, who were on the board, didn't raise any money. So it's not as simple as it might seem. There are a lot of reasons that went into that. And everybody that I know in VFP knows that we need to get younger members, people of color, women, all of those things that you mentioned, Patrick. That's, nobody argues that. And we need to find better ways of doing it. And that's one of the things that we're talking about today. We need to look at some specific ways. What organizations should we look to? That are out there doing the work in places that we don't usually do that work. And so those are some helpful specifics. But I think that we need to be honest about what has happened, and being honest about that is not just to take a broad brush and say that this younger generation was driven out in some way. So anyway, we can do better than we've done. And I just love the fact that Josh and Matt are on the board, and I'm looking forward to getting more people who are a lot younger. All we got to do is look around at the people who are on panels and look in the mirror and figure out that we have something important that we've got to do differently. So I'll leave it at that. But for my part, about the future of VFP, and one of the things that Patrick mentioned when he was getting this idea for this panel together, was being better about recruiting and retaining members. And we've talked about different ways to do that, and different groups that we need to start getting more intentional about recruiting and retaining. But I wanted to point out two things that could go along with that. One, and I won't get into the reasons why I'm in favor of this, because if you were at the previous panel where we were talking about move to amend and figuring out ways that Veterans for Peace and Move to Amend can work together more. You've already heard my pitch on that, but that is one thing that will put us in positions of working with a broader range of people than we have typically. The other thing is to get a working group together in Veterans for Peace that focuses on membership organizing, doing a better job of helping our members organize wherever they're at, and also recruiting and retaining members. And we are going to have a membership organizer on staff soon with the money that we've raised here at this convention. And if we have a working group, it can bring in ideas from chapters and individuals around the country who are and I'll just throw one example out, going to junior colleges. I mean, Lord knows there's any number of examples of how we can expand the recruiting, and then we can work on the retaining. So as we get ideas from people around the country, and try this, this works over here, we'll try it. If it looks like something that can be done in different places, so we start taking some of those practices that have been proven to work and using them in as many different places as want to participate in that experiment. So I think that's one way of institutionalizing maybe our efforts at recruiting and retaining members. And I'm interested in seeing that working group get together. So that's pretty much what I wanted to mention in this, and be happy to hear from people too.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'd like to start off some of the discussion. I have a slightly different vantage and position before we get started with comments from everybody else. And just mention that for many years, and again, it's been many years since my original court-martial and entrance into the GI movement, I did not work with veterans organizations. And I didn't because some of my concern involved women were there to make coffee and carry the water. Women weren't really truly participating, even though they were veterans. So I looked around and I joined medical organizations. I joined an organization called the Medical Committee for Human Rights. It took me many years after working on community issues and with community organizations to decide that I would come back in and would work with both Vietnam Veterans Against the War and Veterans for Peace. And I found at the beginning of work with VFP that there were just certain assumptions that were made, and they were typical assumptions made in a primarily male organization. But I thought it was an important enough organization to stay in, to struggle through these issues. And I found VFP to be the place where we could do our work on Agent Orange that involved healing the wounds of war, bringing former enemies together, having the Vietnamese and American veterans work together in common cause, and bringing legislation to Congress. Through my association with Veterans for Peace, I also learned a number of other things. And I need to say that my first love is doing local organizing. It's talking with people and moving them and getting them, both if it's going to be going into the schools or in the streets or in other organizations. It is our being with other people and struggling with other people. And through the last few years, as I've worked on the board, and this is going on my third year, I too went through some of the disturbances that Josh also did, only differently, and felt it's really important for us to reach out and speak with one another. And I know there are some of you who talk about my phone calls. I do call people and talk with them. Emails to me can lead to incredible misunderstandings and anger and arguments. And when we get together and we talk with each other, that we can improve that communication. It also has been an honor for me to work with Four Arrows, who was at our convention last year, and to learn from him a different way of looking at issues, in a way, what he calls common indigenous worldview manifestations. So bear with me when I just go through a few of them. To me, it's important to have these values in perspective, to see them and to look at them and remember them, better than setting up any kind of a construct or a committee. So I'll go through them. One is the socially purposeful life, which I believe in VFP we feel we all have. Aware of the vital importance of diversity. You've heard Patrick speak about, and Josh, and we are certainly all aware on the board of that importance of diversity. We learn from each other. We learn from people who are different from us, and we come together, I think, is just a much stronger whole. Emphasis on community welfare. That means the welfare, too, of the internal health and well-being of the organization. Respect for various gender roles and fluidity, to have that respect and that understanding. Earth and all systems, that we see the earth and all systems as living and loving, that we don't just talk about humans. That there is an emphasis on heart overhead. And I know that's a difficult concept for many of us to understand and believe in, but that heart and that concern for others, whether it's embedded in a code of conduct or whether it's the way that we act towards each other, is just incredibly important. That we need to develop a positive potential. Empathetic, to differentiate it from sympathetic. Empathetic is to be able to understand who we are and who the person is we're working with and we're relating to. It means to be able to know how we're feeling on a certain day and be able to be empathetic with other human beings and say, I'm not them and they're not me. They have a different experience than I do. But how do we become empathetic and understanding of each other? That we need to be animistic and biocentric. Words as sacred, truthfulness as essential. High interpersonal engagement. Intolerance of injustice, and that's intolerance of injustice outside of our community and within our community. That we all have a responsibility for that. Generosity is the highest expression of courage, and that means generosity towards each other in the organization and to others outside of the organization. Conflict resolution, that the reason for conflict resolution is to bring people back into community, to be able to work through that conflict, and to understand that all life forms are sentient. I'll just say, to answer the question of where do I see VFP, I see us struggling internally towards those values, and I see us working even stronger and together to do education in high schools, in colleges, about the military, about United States Corporation, and about what seems to be our need to continue to develop more and better forms of warfare, and to have the understanding and raise the issue that we are an organization of veterans, that we are for peace, and that we are for an end to war. Thank you. And with that, I'll start asking for questions from the audience. Ken Mayers, you're so patient. I see your hand up. Would you start?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the panel for all of their inputs. And it's great to have Josh and Matt on the board. We have a lot we can learn from them, and I know they're going to do a great job. I noticed a couple of notes back in the chat that David Cooley asked, have any conversations gone on with About Face and their possible take on why they have not felt comfortable being part of Veterans for Peace? As board members know, I have been lobbying for the last 2 years, 2.5 going on 3 years, to have a joint meeting of our board with the leadership of About Face. and I will continue to try to press that. Now, I know that About Face has issues with us, but along with what Susan was saying about talking with one another, face to face if possible, Zoom window to Zoom window if necessary, can make a big difference. And so that is certainly one of the more obvious ways, because we're two organizations that really need each other. We have assets that would be of terrific use to them, and they have a great asset that we all know is essential to us, and that is youth and energy. But we have a chapter structure, they don't. We have a way of being known to the public to an extent that they don't. So I think it's an obvious move we should put in considerable effort into achieving. And I think there's a terrific future for veterans in the peace movement, whether it's goes under the name of Veterans for Peace, under the name of About Face, Veterans Against the War, whatever the name will be. I think all our interest is in making sure that there is an effective veterans voice in the peace movement. And while I have the microphone, I'll just put another shameless plug for legacies, because again, if we can bring youth in, they may not have the resources, financial resources, that our vanishing older membership has. And so I am going to put again in the chat links to the letter of intent that people can explain, what they're going to do for a legacy in VFP. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ken. The next hand raised I see is Doug Rawlings, who is one of the founders of Veterans for Peace. Welcome, Doug. It's great to see you here. And I wonder sometimes if you ever envisioned how long this organization would continue and how wonderful it would become.
Well, I got to say, first of all, I'm not going to ask any questions. I'm just going to preach, right? No. First of all, and this, with great sincerity, I got to tell you, this has been a wonderful, wonderful convention. The speakers have been terrific. The conversations have been terrific. I'm so impressed. And as Joshua alluded to earlier, I've witnessed this organization go up and down some pretty deep slopes, and I thought it was heading down to the bottom a few years ago, and you guys have pulled it back up again, and it's a vibrant organization, and it's wonderful. A couple of things historically. I like to remind people that when we formed Veterans for Peace, there were 5 of us, okay? And one of the things and Jerry Genesio was a very conservative guy, right? He was a driving force. He's a very conservative guy, but his brother was killed in Vietnam. And he just saw the military in a different way. And then he and Judy Genesio went to Nicaragua as witnesses for peace. And they came back from that, and they saw what the military, our United States military, was doing in Central America. And they said, we got to do something to stop that. So that was the beginning ground. We started Veterans for Peace because of Central America, what was going on in Central America. And we also said, very specifically, this is 1985 now, that we did not want to have an auxiliary group of women. We wanted women members to be full members and not have any of this kind of bullshit about people being put in certain categories because of gender or age or race or whatever. But of course, we're 5 people in Maine, so we had no idea that this organization was going to expand the way it did. And now I'm looking at all these things that are happening. I was watching that incredibly moving presentation of the deported veterans and thought to myself, we had no idea that Veterans for Peace would ever have any of that kind of contact, right? That kind of thing going for it. So I'm so impressed with it. I also like to remind people that, our first field trip, if you will, our first contingency that we sent somewhere else was to the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union, to meet with Russian soldiers who were veterans of their Afghan war, because we as Vietnam veterans saw a real it's kind of a very similar situation for those folks, and it was exactly right. I mean, so the international thing, and again, Susan, you've made reference to, I think, is incredibly important. And gosh, I can go on and on and on. Of course, I taught peace studies for 27 years at the university, right? I would never I wouldn't tell the students I was a Vietnam veteran until about halfway through the course, because we'd be talking about all of these. I was talking about peace activism and all that kind of stuff, and I would bring up Veterans for Peace, and the students were stunned that they come. This is a very conservative state, and they come from, their families are very conservative, and their fathers are pro-military and all this kind of crap. And they were stunned that veterans would actually be looking at situations differently than their parents or grandparents were. It was an incredible experience doing that. And finally, I guess I'll say, I just returned from 12 days in Vietnam. I went with my son. First time I've been back in 53 years. And I went to a conference. I said I was not going to go back as a tourist. And I went to a conference by the Vietnamese people on heritage in the city of Hue, and there were over 500 people attending, scholars and students, mostly Vietnamese. And we were invited to attend this conference because we represented veterans who fought against the war, veterans that fought for the Vietnamese people. And again, these people were stunned. They had no idea. We're looking at people in their 30s and 40s, Vietnamese people. They had no idea that there was a GI resistance movement, that there were really actual American soldiers who put their lives on the line to resist the war and did work afterwards. They were just blown away by that. And I thought, yeah, this is what it's all about. And I also met up with Chuck Searcy, and we drove around the northern part of Vietnam. I went into the DMZ, right? Holy crow. When I went back in the day when I was there, if you went to DMZ, you were a prisoner of war. That's where you were going. And I saw these monuments and these statements of a people who rose up against this colonial force and won, right? And think of how hard that would be. And in my remarks, by the way, I also point out that I would love to have Iraq and Afghan and Somali veterans have the opportunity I had to go back to the country that they tore apart in some form or fashion. And the experience of going to Project Renew, where Chuck Searcy is working with Vietnamese people to remove unexploded ordnance, and then to the Friendship Village, where they're working with Agent Orange victims and stuff like that. To actually be there, to walk the grounds, to talk to people, to engage with people, was incredibly enlightening. And this is the beauty, I think, that the real force behind Veterans for Peace is that we have a different perspective than a lot of people think. When they hear veterans, they think red, white, and blue, militaristic, all this kind of stuff, unapologetic, hoorah and all that stuff. And to run into veterans who don't have that worldview, I think is enlightening for a lot of people. So anyways, I'm done, but thank you. Thank you all for continuing this great work. It's a great organization.
Thank you, Doug. Our next speaker is Becky Lewing. Becky, who has also done a great deal of work in Vietnam and with Veterans for Peace. Becky.
Thank you, Susan. Gotta get that little window out of my eye view. Yeah, I have a lot to say, but I'll try to say it briefly. I also have a long history with VFP, having joined in like 97 or 98. And it's funny because like watching the resolutions thing, I always flash back to this convention where people were arguing passionately about the difference between an embargo and no, it's not an embargo, it's a blockade, like figuring out the language around the resolution.
Hello, Paul. This is Richard. Did you call yesterday? I forgot to call you back. Sorry.
Mute Paul, please.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, I first I want to acknowledge that there's some, the last few years have been really challenging for the reasons you mentioned, the differences around the Ukraine and stuff. But we have to acknowledge that Trump himself was a lightning rod that caused a lot of people to like really feel the pain of women being discriminated against, of people of color being discriminated against, and they didn't have the power to do anything about Trump. You know, we all felt that way after he was elected, like, oh my God, now we have to deal with this too. And but he became a lightning rod. And I feel like a lot of people, the power that they felt they had was within their own local communities, their own organizations. And so they started pointing at the people in their own organizations that were exhibiting some of these qualities of being, you know, patriarchal or, you know, Eurocentric or whatever. I mean, I've been part since 2019 or 2020, I forget when we formed, but I've been part of this great book club called Be the Change book group within VFP Circle that has studied you know, multiple books about racism. And I've learned and grown so much through that. So I really recommend that people read those books. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and Four Arrows book, which was the latest one that we worked our way through. Just very important wisdom there. I also want to acknowledge the effects of COVID and separating ourselves physically from one another. And I think it's so important that we find a way to create the spaces, and those spaces can be virtual, but I think we need to find more in-person opportunities and really create the space, which also means creating the time for conversations, for these challenging conversations, but also for conversations where we can just tell our stories and get to know each other. I mean, I think that was so valuable to hear Freddie Champagne talking about, you know, all these things that he's done over his lifetime. And you forget about, you know, or maybe you never knew. And so to share a bit of ourselves and to share, even the younger vets, you know, have lived, they've gone through I mean, I can't even imagine the trauma of having done multiple deployments. And so, you know, those stories, they don't always want to go there and share those things. But acknowledging that people have this life experience that they bring and trying to be, you know, just like being willing to reach. I'm a shy person, so I'm not always good at this, but being able to talk to people you don't know and try to learn about them and find out what they're bringing to the table. And so I have a couple suggestions because I know I could go on and on. When I helped found a WILP branch, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, another aging out old organization, like 100-year-old organization, you know. But we founded a branch in 2004 in Humboldt. And when we founded a branch, they sent a trainer out for 2 days. They did a training in nonviolent direct action techniques, but they also did a day-long training in facilitation skills, how to facilitate meetings. And then we all practiced that, you know, after they went home. And we could be doing sensitivity training, we could be doing anti-racist training, and another really important thing, I think, to draw in the young people, because we all know the power of poetry and music at this convention and at other gatherings, theater. We should be really working on creating opportunities for people to engage. I know that warrior writers, if you read the book that Jan Barry now has on the market called Waging Art, it's really important, getting across the idea that art is an important way for people to work out their PTSD. And it's an important way to express our anti-war ideas. And locally, you know, like realizing that a lot of, you know, some young vets at least, or parents, maybe providing childcare at your meetings. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could try to accommodate people same way when you would think about how to accommodate disabled people. And so I'll leave it there because I know there's a lot more ideas out there to be spoken. Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Thank you, Becky. Kelly, you're next.
Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Wadsworth from Chapter 132 in the great state of Oregon. So greetings from the West Coast. It's been great to hear from all the board members, and I have a question for you. With the rising tide of violence, with the rising tide of rights being stripped away, have there been conversations, or maybe I'll say what kind of conversations around anti-war efforts being applied at home as well as international, like a synthesis between the domestic and the international in our efforts and our work?
Who would like to take that question? Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, that's a great question. About a decade ago, we were conscious of a slogan called peace at home, peace abroad. And we saw it as a prism to work through our, to see our work through, a prism to see our work through. So Michael McPherson, our executive director at the time, was the head or the co-chair of the Hands Up, Don't Shoot coalition in Ferguson, Missouri, with the Michael Brown case. And then we went to the water protectors in the Dakotas. We had a pretty major, mainly from the West Coast, but a pretty major representation there. So I think, and when I came off of leadership of the board about 1.5 years ago, I joined the Impacted Families movement, which is, people who have been killed by police murder. And I think that's probably the biggest component of the peace at home that I would like to see us involving ourselves in. And I know that some people have done that. I'm not saying people got to join it and with both feet in there, but that we should be involved in working, with the Impacted Family movement. Right now, I've been working in it for 2 years, and I'm in meetings with the cousin of Emmett Till. I'm in meetings with the uncle of Oscar Grant, Uncle Bobby, where they have initiated, out of Oakland, same place the Panthers came out of, where they have initiated 5 laws in their work. And so I think that we need to explore the parameters of peace at home and peace abroad and make it a living viewpoint.
Thank you, Patrick. Barry Reich.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for this discussion. I'll try to say something eloquent, of course, or something meaningful. I don't know what's going to come out. I just thought I'd take a moment here. But, I've been a member of this organization for 32 years. And, it seems like it's always the same kind of conversation, and, we're never going to become perfect. But, especially with regard to young and old, we need to respect each other. Our indigenous people respect their elders. So we need to respect our elders. If not, we don't have things to learn from one another. But yeah, we need to pass the torch. Most of us, I do that presente every year, and we're on the upward decline. I'm in the last quarter of my life here. I've devoted the last 32 years to trying to stop war, and I don't feel like we've been very successful, obviously. But anyhow, but we have a wisdom that those of us who have been around, we have a wisdom of this organization that's valuable. And so you can't just cast that off. So I want to put that out there. And also, of course we want diversity. Of course we want, to have everything. But a lot of times I think you need to be a solid member before you serve on the board. And I think a lot of times we've taken people and put them on the board when they're just new to the organization, don't really have a sense of our history, sense of the work we've done. And we haven't been valuing each other. So I think it's important that we get people that are solid members, you know, and I want to say, especially, I think of all the challenging times we've had these past couple of years have been particularly difficult, especially for myself, just having people within our chapters that are supporting this fucking war in Ukraine. Excuse me for my language, but it's been really, really challenging. I've always known that someday this whole pacifism, just war thing was going to nail us. And I think that it's nailed us this time. But it's also helping us to say who we are. This is who we are. You know, you support when you sign up for us, you support our statement of purpose, or you don't. I think that many people maybe haven't read that statement, you know, but and I will support that statement. I will fight for that statement of purpose till the day I die, you know, because that's our value. That's who we are. We're an anti-war organization. We're about abolishing war non-violently. You know, that's who we are. And if people want to come along and try to change us, I'm not for that, man. I'm for who we are. And that's why I'm here. That's why I'm with this organization. I just hope that whatever happens, we'll continue it. I don't, you know, to me, there's no pat answer to bringing people in, except being out there and being available so people know who we are and listening to our message. You know, we got a powerful voice here. And as we heard with our speakers, we got the truth. And it surprises me that people are not coming to us for the truth. We're the truth, man. We're the ones seeking and speaking the truth. So I'm sorry my bell didn't work last night. I think I kind of blew the whole Presente deal, but nonetheless, my heart was there. So that's it.
And we know that, Barry, and thank you for your
Susan,
work on that.
Can I comment?
Just
Susan?
David Cooley.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Susan, Matt asked to speak to that point.
Matt, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to throw it out there. You know, this is just my opinion, so take it for what it's worth. But, you know, these challenges that we're having are not at all exclusive to VFP. I'm a member of the Religious Society of Friends. We've got challenges of the same ilk all across the board, literally meetings, yearly meetings splitting apart because of the differences of opinions. We are in an echo chamber, and we are in a sort of a bathtub, if you will. I don't know a good analogy, but we're in this space where we are reflecting our culture back toward each other. So, you know, from my perspective as one of the token so-called young vets on the board, I'll just say the more externally focused we are, the more motivated I am to be involved. The more internally focused we are, the more we go around in circles, the more we are not having that external focus, the harder it is for me to stay involved in the long term. So I only say that, that's not to say we should ignore our problems. That's not to say we should let people get away with bad behavior. That's not to say that we shouldn't try to build a more inclusive, welcoming, and belonging organization. We need to treat each other with tender love and care. That's how we get there. We don't just become diverse and automatically become an inclusive organization. It takes effort. It takes hearing people with different ideas. It takes honoring the humanity and all and everything each of us bring to the table, and making sure people feel valued and feel heard. All of that should be just a prerequisite to being an organization. The more we can elevate that and lift that and be kind and loving and caring toward each other, the more we can spend our time focused externally on the thing that we are trying to overcome. And I'll just leave it at this. What entity or who, I hate to say they, but what benefits from us being externally focused and what benefits from us being internally focused? I think you can ruminate on that and come up with some ideas on your own. But I just wanted to throw all that out there.
Thank you, Matt. David Cooley.
Thank you. I want to go back actually to what you said earlier, Susan, and what Four Arrows had to say, and the points that you read off. Someone mentioned that the book club had read Four Arrows' book, and some of us had worked with Four Arrows for a few months. Hopefully that could come about again. But it's incredibly important. Those points that Susan read off earlier. It can make a difference, but those changes don't happen overnight. I've worked since 2017, ever since Standing Rock. I'm the only VFP person who stayed with INITC, which stands for International Indigenous Initiative for International Transformative Collaboration. A mouthful. But I've stayed with it ever since 2017. And I can tell you that change happens very slowly. It's a very slow personal evolution that occurs. And that change does not occur in the course of a top-down, militaristic, or corporate structure. It isn't going to happen. So when we think about how we go forward as an organization, as individuals, we need to keep those things in mind also. That thinking in those terms of being able to move forward, those things are not going to bring forward those kinds of peaceful changes that we want to see for that world that we want, for the future, for all the rest of us. That's mostly what I have to say. And as far as peace at home, one of the things that I have done personally is amicus, which stands for friend, and that's visiting people in prison. I visited sex offenders, I visited murderers in prison. And I can tell you, making the difference for one person's life is very important, and it can bring peace in the community because almost everybody gets out of prison. And if you can bring peace to that one person who's going to get out, that means you're bringing peace to the community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, David. And I also would like to tell everybody, David is actually the person who invited me to meet with Four Arrows and started working with a small group of us. And one of the things that we do all of the time is, as a board, is to look at the activities in which we're involved, bring in chapters and projects and working groups to meet with the board so that we know what actually is the work that is going on in the organization. And that is so important for all of us to understand and know the various activities and hear each other. There's obviously never enough time to be able to do this. And I'll just plug this as Ken plugged his issue. We have open monthly board meetings, the third Saturday of the month. They are open to all members of Veterans for Peace. All you have to do is find that link and join us. There is time to hear from the community, and we always want to hear from you. So we are trying to learn more, both about what is going on the local level, and also have you understand some of the issues that the board is dealing. But we need to do all of this together. Thank you. Bob Rudy. Bob Rudy, are you there?
You're muted, Bob.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong way. Hi, thank you, Susan. Thank you, Mike. I may be one of the newest members on the meeting. I was in the Army 65, 68, live outside of Havertide Grace, Maryland these days. And I've been involved with the American Legion, VFW, Disabled American Vets, met and became aware of your organization for the first time through the Golden Rule, as Becca and I hosted it through our Quaker organization that we learned about it coming around in the top of the Chesapeake Bay in the April, early May. When I learned about it, heard about it, I realized I had to join the organization, met Helen and Jerry, and they stayed with us one night and became enthralled with the organization and have been doing a little bit of work with you all since. I first got involved with Ralph Nader and I'm going to do a plug of how I learned how to do some organizing with him. When I first got out of law school in 1974, 74 to 76, I was the executive director of the Iowa Public Interest Research Group, which was working with students from about 15 colleges throughout Iowa to get involved in lobbying the Iowa General Assembly on environmental, consumer, anti-nuclear energy, and a whole bunch of other issues. How to go out and how to talk with them, how to bring them in, how to get them involved, how to work with them on the board of directors. I say that as background because I guess 2007 to 2018, 17, I think I was on the board of directors of the Friends Committee of National Legislation. Matt, I think we overlapped some. 2008, they had a funding decline because of the recession, because of investments that fell on them like crazy, had to go out and bring some money back up, and did. They had an internship program for young college graduates. Didn't have to be Quakers, had to want to do the kinds of stuff that the Friends Committee on National Legislation did. They laid off staff, but they didn't lay off their interns. They increased the interns. I was on their field committee, which worked mostly with trying to do organizing, working with our friends throughout the country to support the organization, to get involved with the organization, to do all kinds of things to put the message out to the organization. When I was on the committee, I passed around copies of Ralph Nader and Donald Ross's book, Action for a Change, a student guide for public interest organizing. I recommend we look at that. It's 1971. It's paperback. It's cheap as a Dickens if we can find it over the internet. It was used. I think the number of interns has gone up. You know, Quakers are in. We were at a Quaker meeting this morning. We're old. We're trying like crazy to bring in younger members. But FCNL has been fabulously successful with this in terms of race, creed, gender, everything else. I think they're between 15 and 20, between 1 and 2 year interns. I know people like internships. You can get college credits for them, as well as maybe a little bit of pay and this and that. It's another idea I'll throw out. How we reach out and work with younger people to bring them in and get them to go out and organize and send the message. I mean, I've been around and I've been doing stuff for quite a while. Most of my career was setting up, organizing, managing state and national legal aid programs. I've done a lot of work in prison ministry, work as well. I should have known about Veterans for Peace a lot earlier. I don't know why I didn't, but I think I may be somebody to look at to say, somehow we're not getting the message out as much as we ought to. So we got to do that more. We know that. Students, young interns, and we're talking about people 22, 23, 24, 25, are wonderful to go out and work with their communities. So that's the idea I wanted to share with you today. Look at that. I like the book a lot, and I look forward to hopefully being involved with you for a long time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Matt Howell.
Hi.
Wonderful to have you here.
Well, thanks for this session, and thanks for the convention and everything everyone is doing to sustain this organization. I think, of course, we all agree this is a necessary organization. To Bob's point about not hearing about the organization, I think that gets to a lot of what we're worried about in terms of sustainment. You would expect that we would have a very fertile population to bring members in from. More than 2/3 of Iraq and Afghan veterans say the wars weren't worth fighting. It's when we're out there in our VFP t-shirts, does anybody have a problem with people coming up to them and not agreeing with what's on the t-shirt, right? I mean, overwhelmingly people respond positively. I remember Barry Ladendorf, past president, telling me a few years ago how they had gone to a marketing consultant, and the marketing consultant said, "What are you talking about changing this logo? You can't have a better logo than what you have in terms of a message that people embrace." So my concerns are the sustainment of all this, the internal things that have been discussed, and I really want to thank Susan and Matt for their comments on that. if we'll face those internal problems again. We're human beings, we're going to have those issues. If we have processes that we have in place to deal with our being human and working with one another, we'll survive that. And key to that is open communication, picking up the phone rather than sending an email, which Susan, just so grateful you said that. But for me, it's the money and it's the membership. And that's the existential issues we are facing. And so I just kind of have a couple thoughts. I have some thoughts on why younger veterans are not joining, or why they join and then don't continue their membership or don't really get involved. But that's all speculation. And I think that gets to my point about we don't know what we don't know. And there's two things. If we don't know why people aren't joining, we need to find out. The other thing, if we don't know how to raise money, if we don't know how to grow membership, that's okay. Okay, we don't have to have the answers. And so one, I'm going to make a suggestion that we look at other organizations. Mike alluded to this in his comments, whether they're sister veteran organizations like VFW, American Legion, they had similar problems, whether it be membership or money, or other social justice advocacy organizations. How are they doing in this era? Because I think a lot of what we're facing is post-Cold War veterans who are in a different culture and a different society and a different, for lack of a better word, technological arena than what we had before. And I'll just say, I went to college in the early 90s. I went to a liberal college in Massachusetts. And we had almost, in my 4 years from 91 to 95, we had almost no political actions on our campus. And so I think that's the culture that post-Cold War veterans are a part of. Now, the caveat being Standing Rock, Black Lives Matter, Occupy, right? Okay, so I think we have to look at what made those successful. How did we get 20, 25 million people out in the streets in 2020 during a pandemic? But how come we can't get more than 5 people to show up for a chapter meeting, right? So I think there's information we have to get here. I think also, too, we have to recognize that the post 9/11 veterans organizations, whether they be Concerned Veterans of America, Iraq and Afghan Veterans of America, About Face, don't have a physical presence, don't have local chapters like we do. And that's not saying that they're doing it correctly and we're not, or we have to go that way. It's just something for us, I think, to keep in mind that if we keep looking back rather than looking forward, we may not be able to sustain ourselves. And then finally, I'll make the pitch that we bring people in to tell us what we don't know. I've been a part of organizations that have had these problems, 2 organizations in particular, where we brought in outsiders, we brought in consultants, and it was miraculous what they told us. If we don't know how to grow membership, and again, that's okay. If we don't know how to bring in money, and again, that's okay, can we bring in people to help us understand how to do those things? And no one has a bigger cringe in their stomach about spending money for something like that than I do. So for everyone who just had a seizure, as I suggest spending money as we barely have any money, I'm with you. But I think those are the things we should be looking at, because our problems are solvable, but they are existential. And but I think if we want to develop the processes, we learn what we don't know, and then we learn what other people are doing to deal with the same issues that we're facing, I think that sustains us going forward. But thank you all for this conversation.
Thank you, Matt. Owen Moody.
You called my name?
Yes, I did.
All right. Well, I got interested in this organization in 1991, and I just thought it was an absolute no-brainer. And I am just so delighted to hear people talking about setting up committees to raise money, to encourage and develop membership and so forth. And what Matthew Hull was just talking about, I have to agree with 1,000%. When I was ED between 2001 and 2005, the board, we had a lot of activity because these wars were just developing, and there was a lot of activity against those wars starting, and then they did start. And then by 2004, we were getting people back from those wars, and they were beginning to join VFP, and then they established Iraq Veterans Against the War and About Face and all that. But all that time that I was ED, there was nobody on the board that was doing anything about membership and money raising. It devolved to me, and I wasn't very good at it. I had too damn much to do. And I frankly was a burnout by 2005. But I'm going to go back a little bit because I was a peacenik right from the beginning. In 1983, I met a man in China who had fought against me in Korea, and we became friends. I brought him and his wife to this country, and we sat down and we wrote a book together. And his daughter, he died last year, but his daughter in China is now my daughter. So I have skin in the game when it comes to China. I have skin in the game when it comes to Russia. I have a good friend in Russia. And when I was in Russia, out in the Urals, messing around with finding a home for slag from a steel mill there, I met a KGB officer who had a son in Afghanistan at the time. And he'd become a peacenik because he was so concerned about his son being in that war and losing him. So, I don't know. I am very much encouraged by what everybody is considering so seriously now about becoming more than just a bunch of people that go out and protest. We have to be more than that, as Matthew has said, and so many other people have said. And probably this is a good place for me to shut up. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey.
Yes, I'm from Kansas City, Chapter 97, and want to thank you, all of the members of VFP, for the honor that we received as Chapter of the Year. I have to say that I'm looking at it as not so much an honor as a challenge. We have a lot of work to do here in Kansas City, and I'm going to do my best to see that happen. You know, a lot of this internal problems, the organizations I've been involved with, I come out of the labor movement and environmental movement and other social movements. But the one that taught me more about what Veterans for Peace seems to be going through now is my local community radio station, which Joshua will probably understand. They tend to be belly button gazers, so to say. They're very focused inward, and as Matt said, we got to be looking outward. And so one of the things that I learned, having been on the board and gone through lawsuits and all sorts of turmoil, was that there are other things than being in charge that need to be done within all of these organizations. And there are all these different working groups. Pick one and get involved. Pick one and do it. So that's really the message that I have, and I think it will do well for the organization. Yes, we have to put faith in our board members and support them as best we can, but we also have to do our own part. So that's my comment.
Thank you so much. John Kim.
Okay, thank you for this opportunity to discuss of this the future of the BFP.
as a former, member of the national board of the PFP, I really would like to see that this organization, to rebuild its organization to the as a larger organization, an effective organization. Okay, so not just trying to grow in membership alone. It's also important that we have a good program for our nation, our people, our members, and the other people around the world. So I think I briefly mentioned two areas that we need to deal with. And the first is, as Josh mentioned, it's an internal issue that you have to stabilize at this time. And I see that you're in a transition mode right now. And I was very shocked to find out at this convention that we still don't know how many members we have. We don't have the membership data, and in other words, this is shocking to me. This shouldn't have never happened to any organization. Okay, if we don't know who are our members, what is our income expenses going on, you cannot run any organizations. It's a dead end, So I hope you can fix this issue as soon as possible. As Matthew suggested, if you don't know how to figure out this issue, please try to get an expert on organizing, organization. So get consultation, and find out which program is best for the accounting, which program is best for maintaining the membership data. Okay, I think that should be fixed as soon as possible. And the other issue is, as I said, it's a program. It's the program that will attract the new members to our organization. If we don't have any good program, this organization will die away. Okay, it's as simple as that. And also, please to keep in mind what the goal and main mission of this organization is. Our name is Veterans for Peace. This is important to keep in mind that we are working for peace, for the change the foreign policy, defense military policy of this country. Okay, if you lose this focus in our future programs, we will not be able to attract new members to this organization, because if you are working on the racial issues, there are so many different racial organizations working on the racial issue. Why we should focus on that issue? No, I'm sorry. To make some, I think we need to consider the racial issues in general life in general, life in general. But for this organization activities, let's focus on war and peace issues in the future. And my best experience as a member of this organization was when I was able to lead a peace delegation to my home country, Korea, South Korea. That happened in 2006. And we had about 6-7 delegation members, peace delegation members. We entered, meeting with a peace organization in South Korea and so on, discuss how we can end the Korean War. How can Korea can achieve a peaceful reunification, etc. This kind of dialogue is more important to us as an organization than spending more time on how to, deal with, racial issues or, etc. So let's, promote that kind of international peace delegation, opportunities in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I think it's really important for everybody to understand the issue of the number of members. We transitioned because of 3 years ago, a decision was made to change computer systems. If you were at the business meeting yesterday, you would have heard the problems we have with the new computer system. It is not anybody's fault other than a decision that was made. We spent over a year of many hours of staff time to deal with that. Number one. Number two, for all of you, as John mentioned, if you are interested in a working group or in working on a national project or connecting with the chapter, that information is available on our website. If you have any questions about whether you're near a chapter that you would like to work with, please just call the national office. We have lots of information. It's accessible. We thank you, John, for bringing that up. And Ellen, how are we doing on time?
I just called Kathy Kelly to tell her she didn't need to be on the Zoom until 5 of. So we can go until like 8 of, but then I
Got it. Okay, we have a couple of more people. Mike Wong.
Yes, hi, just two observations. One is, in addition to being the national vice president, I've been the vice president of the San Francisco chapter for many, many years. I've networked with a whole bunch of different organizations in the peace community and other communities. One of the things, interestingly, that I've networked with is the American Legion chapter in San Francisco. And I've gone to a couple of meetings, even though they represent, the conservative side and we're kind of more the liberal left side. In past years, we had antagonistic relationships, but in recent years, we've developed actually quite good relations with them, and we get along quite well now, and we actually like each other, even if we have some different views on various issues. I've gone to a couple of their meetings and, they have all the same problems that we do. It's the older generation wondering about how to recruit younger people, different people arguing with each other. It's like I go to their meetings, I'm going, they're just like us. So that's just one observation. The other thing is I also network with other peace groups like Code Pink, Answer, etc. And I noticed that Code Pink and Answer are able to recruit younger people. And I asked the West Coast leader of Answer not too long ago how they do it. And he said, they come to us. We hold demonstrations and we have events and so on, and people just come to our table and say, I want to get involved. How do I join? So I think, John Kim and all these other people have suggested that the way to get out there, like Matt Southworth said, is to focus, on our goals, on our mission, and, just get out there, do things, and people will come. I think that's kind of the main way that we would recruit young people, because when I look at organizations that are recruiting young people, that's how they tell me they do it.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I can't see your name.
It's Marty.
Marty, come. Marty, did you want to talk?
Unmute, Marty.
There goes Marty.
Marty, we're waiting.
Hello.
Hi, Marty.
Hello. Yeah, hello?
Yes. Hi.
Okay. I've been a veteran for peace decades before I joined in 2003. And I have to say, it has often been painful to be in this organization because people don't listen. And that's a generality, but there's a habit of not listening among many of the activists. So I would suggest slow your roll when interacting with each other. Try not to do emotional cannibalism. You can't process your own stuff through my issues because I'm trying to talk about mine, not yours. It's not going to work. It works. Be aware that some people have intelligence PTSD and have requirements for safety where they can't make public disclosures. And also the suggestion that people do peacemaking in public areas like the internet. There's also sorts of places you can make a difference without even attending a rally, just taking apart the war mentality that goes on every day. Like even just checking into the comment section and responding to some of the stuff that just stirs the violence and all that. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Marty. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
Dan Shea.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty. That's great. I know exactly what you're talking about there. Some great suggestions here. I think something that Becky raised about art and music being an important factor in it. I am an artist, and you can see some of my artwork behind me here. One of the things that I want to just kind of tell a story. I've been a long time activist way before VFP. I was a labor activist. I was involved in the sanctuary movement for Central American refugees. As a labor organizer, representative, I was involved in a very, very difficult, I forget what they call it, battle with a international corporation in which I was threatened. They tried to bribe me. I eventually lost my job as an organizer, and I was broke. I was, in real trouble. I went back to college. I took out loans, which I'm still paying for. But I went back in the 90s, and my campus actually was very active. They were active in trying to get Black Studies as a degree granting program. I was involved with MECHA, the Chicano Student Union, and we worked to create a Chicano Latino Studies program, which exists today. We did so many things. I helped form a KPSU radio station on campus. These were things where we brought students together. So students were very active. But I didn't talk about being a veteran until 1991 and the first Gulf War, and the bombs started going off, and my post-traumatic stress hit me. It hit me so hard that I had to say something about it, and I wrote a little article for the campus paper. And because of that, people came up and found me. I don't know how they found me, but they found me and wanted to ask me questions about why I was involved in the war. And I didn't have answers at the time. I just said, I don't believe in war. I think people are dying right now. We need to stop it. Well, I feel that right now. People are dying and we have to stop it. That's one of the major things that VFP is really about. We're going to try to stop the killing. But I think if we're talking about the future of VFP and how we reach out to people, I think Mike Wong and John Lim both put something forward. What got me wasn't just the mission statement. It was that VFP was in the public. It was doing demonstrations. It was sitting, I crossed paths with them many, many times. And eventually, because they were doing work in the community, I got involved. And we would try to continue to do that recently. Becky just put on a watch party for the crossing. We did it at where we hold our meetings at the Friends Meeting Hall in Portland, Oregon. And, you know, we had one new person that came to that event. And sometimes it's not a bunch of people that come, it can be just one person who joined Veterans for Peace, who I got to meet because I was doing counter recruitment, and I went to the high school, which was a all-girls high school, Catholic high school, and he was one of the teachers who, I wasn't even in his class, but he had heard from the other teacher that we were there, and I handed him a card, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He had been with Vietnam Veterans Against the War when he came out, but it had been a long time since he had been involved in it. And his father was somebody who had been on a ship when they were doing nuclear testing. And his father got cancer because the nuclear testing stuff fell on the ship, and the radiation, of course, got to him, and his father died because of that. So, you know, with Oppenheimer out there in the movies, with the whole issue of this possibility of a nuclear war with Ukraine, all of those things were very personal to him, and he came with his own story, which was powerful, and to listen to that. But he also has the ability to reach out to so many more students because of he's a teacher who teaches moral ethics. So we've got a new member there. The other is I because I'm an artist, you know, I wanted to take my granddaughter to the Portland Art Museum recently. And so I took her to that, to the museum, and I was wearing a VFP shirt. It was one that said "Abolish ICE." And so I'm going with my granddaughter, who's 11 years old, and this woman stops me and says, "Can you come here for a minute?" Sure. She says, "I want to take a picture of you with that shirt." I said, "Well, I should stand right next to one of these masterpieces because I want to be in history too." You know? So she took a picture, and you know, we went on looking at the exhibits and came back, and we saw her sitting down at the bench. She called me back over again, and I said, "Well, what's your name?" And she says, "Pat, and I'm from Texas, and you know what they're doing to the immigrants in Texas? And they're putting barbed wire up, and they're putting people in these camps." She says, "It's horrible what they're doing there. And I'm really glad to have met you here in Portland, that you're doing something with Veterans for Peace, speaking out about these things. Wear your swag, wear that out there, because it does reach people and they come up to you. And that's how you begin to talk to people. I do think COVID hurt us a lot. We isolated so much, we weren't able to do it in person. But I'm starting to get out there in person, and the more times I get out there in person, the more times we have these conversations, and these personal conversations with people is to not just the mission, but to tell them what we're doing, who we are, because we need to have an identity that people can come to, and let them know how to get a hold of you. That's so important. So I thank you. I want to thank everybody here, because all these are great suggestions. No questions here. I think Mike is doing some good work here when you want to reach out to the media with somebody out there who's going to really help us do that. Because one of the hardest things I've had to do is, with this new climate, I can't find the journalists anymore. I can't get.
And thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have to cut off in a couple minutes.
Thank you.
And I really would like to ask other panelists for their closing comments to this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, gosh, lots to chew on. I'll just say, yeah, there's a lot to ruminate about. Veteran organizing is hard. I'm not always sure why that is, but I've noticed that something about organizing with veterans is a different animal than other issue areas. Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I want to hear from some other folks. Thank you for all of the thoughts and food for discussion. I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Josh. Matt, go ahead.
Two things from me. I hear you all loud and clear. We need some fundraising help. I want to tell you that, right now I work for Harvard, and I want to take that $52 billion endowment and all the lessons I can learn from the Ivy League and bring them right to VFP so that we can knock the fundraising right out of the park. I've got a decade of experience doing this, and I think we can really build a solid fundraising apparatus for this organization. The second thing, and I'll credit Lola Moonfog, who's in the chat, mentioned this first. Doing the self work is so important. You can't have a peaceful organization or a peaceful life if you don't have peace in your heart. And it doesn't mean we have to have peace in our hearts every single minute of the day. It doesn't mean we won't ever feel anger, or we won't ever feel sad, or any of those other emotions. But we have to do the work of healing our traumas, healing our wounds, of quieting our insecurities, of loving ourselves. Words matter, not just the words you say to others, but the words you say to yourself. Don't make assumptions about anyone else. Don't take things personally, and always do your best. If you do those 4 things, we'll have one hell of an organization. Thanks for being here. I really have appreciated the conversation, and I look forward to continuing the work.
Thank you, Matt. Patrick, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We had a little flash of lightning, and I got disconnected, so I didn't know if I was still up there. Yeah, I just think it was a wonderful conversation. I'm glad we had it. I was afraid that people were going to get pissed off at me for raising it, but I think it was very positive, and I'm glad we had it.
Thank you, Patrick. Mike Ferner.
Yeah, I want to thank Patrick for having the idea for having this session. It turned out much better than I thought it was. Also, love Matt's comments, and wanted to point out that Matt got back on the board because of Susan's ability to reach out over the phone and convince people to do damn near anything. But I have been listening closely the whole time, reading the chats, communicating with people, and a hell of a lot of good ideas have come up. And I'm going to try to talk with as many people as I can and see ways that we can incorporate some of these ideas, at least some. And I just hope that people will be patient, because there are seriously good ideas here, but they take a while to implement, and it takes a while just to get around to talk to people to understand their ideas better. And I'm just one person, and the staff is busy as hell, and we need to find a way. And it's not like I'm the only person doing stuff. Some board members, Susan, and others are really doing this too a lot. But I just want to say that this is not a huge machine that can take all these ideas and just get them rolling in a short manner of time. So as the high quality of them is a lot to recommend, why we need to pursue as many of those ideas as people have brought up as possible. But just bear with us is all I can say, I guess.
We do have this session recorded, so we will be able to go back and review, and we're saving the chat. Thank you all so much for coming today and having this wonderful conversation. It looks like we should have allotted maybe 2 or 3 hours to it, but you've all been wonderful, and it's great to hear all the different ideas. And yes, Patrick, thank you so much for coming up with this as an idea for a panel. Great idea, and maybe we ought to figure out some way of keeping the discussion going. So thank you all for coming today. It's great to see you all. Have a wonderful rest of the day, and remember to stay on and hear Kathy Kelly. Thank you.
Don't stay on this meeting. Go to the link that I just put in the chat. And we will be starting with Kathy Kelly in a couple of minutes. And I'm sorry we had to cut this off, but things are things.
Time is
Bye,
time.
everybody. See you in the next meeting.